All right, welcome back to episode 2 of my new podcast, This Week in Destiny. If you caught the last one, I was debating on whether to turn this into a podcast or not, but I decided to go ahead with it, at least for now. So this is episode 2. I'm going to be covering the week of August 27th to September 3rd. So this is the last, the last week in Destiny. And the podcast is available, of course, on this YouTube channel right here, where it will be originally posted. I'm aiming to get these posted every Tuesday morning, within a couple hours of Tuesday reset. And they will be posted on Spotify as well. The timing might be a little bit off, but whether you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, feel free to like, share these podcasts, and comment. Please comment. I'm always glad to talk to anybody in the comments section. So for this week, I'm going to be covering 3 builds. So I got 3 build overviews. That's going to take up the bulk of the episode, and as well as a bunch of weapons to talk about and activities as well. Because this week, as you know, we got the Encore Overture exotic mission, which turned out to be a pretty great mission, IMO, and as you can see here, I've done it 3 times on my Titan already. I don't even have it unlocked on my Warlock and Hunter because I never saw the point in running through 3 acts of seasonal content with my other characters when the seasonal content or episodic content has been fairly average, at least as far as the storyline content goes. Like, I like to just get these missions unlocked, but I'll talk more about the seasonal activities as well. But as far as the exotic mission, I personally loved it. I thought it was a great mission. I went through it blind solo for the first run, and I made it through the first boss with the Tormentor and the Subjugator just fine until I got to the Hydra, to the final boss, and I realized I didn't really have a optimal damage loadout. I didn't know how long the damage phases were, and I just wanted to get it done. So I ended up inviting a couple people off LFG when I was like, after I wiped one time with doing very little damage on the boss, and then we got it done pretty fast. And since then I've run it on Expert only, so I've done it 2 or 3 times on Expert, and got my catalyst for the Choir of One exotic auto rifle. But yeah, very good exotic mission, and it kind of inspired me to go into the Whisper mission, because I hadn't done that yet. I was still behind on going to get my crafted Whisper, and same goes for 0 Hour. But yeah, it just kind of reminded me of the Whisper mission a little bit from what I had seen of it, and I just generally like the vibe of Encore Overture a lot. If you're looking for good content on that, then I would suggest you go and watch some Chablo91. He's done a couple videos on the mission, Solo Flawless Normal, Solo Flawless Expert, and Chablo is one of the best content creators out there for opinion-based and walkthrough guided videos, how to Solo Flawless basically anything in the game, from dungeons to Grandmasters to exotic missions. So I think his opinion and gameplay is quite valuable to the community, so you should go give a like, follow, and share to Chablo. You can also check out Vendetta. Vendetta, I think, put up a couple of world record speed runs already on the mission on Expert for Solo Flawless. I think like around 10 minutes was the total run time, so that was very impressive gameplay. If you want to see some impressive high skilled gameplay, then you could do that. And then I saw another video by Lord Moop, which is a smaller content creator. I suggest you go check him out on YouTube as well. Does a lot of Solo Flawless content, a little bit of commentary here and there, but he'd done the new exotic mission in about 25 minutes with one single loadout and no loadout swaps, with Whisper the Worm as the heavy. So that was an interesting video. You can check that out. So yeah, that led me to thinking about activities on a grander scale in this game. Now, one of the things that I've been doing, and I talked about in the last podcast, was the weekly Witch Queen campaign missions and Lightfall missions, and how they're a good source for farming up alloys. But at the end of the day, if the weekly mission isn't really farmable, then you're not really playing it. There's no reason to go in there, which is a shame. So the exotic missions kind of got me thinking about this on a grander, in a bigger picture, because a lot of these exotic missions that I've enjoyed playing are, I was just looking at the ritual this week for Savathun's Throne World, the weekly mission. If you want to farm alloys, like, it's not really worth doing the ritual because Savathun is like a 30 to 45 minute mission in a fire team. Like, if you're gonna do it solo, it could take you like 50 minutes. And I used to solo flawless all of these weekly missions on Master, so I kind of know how long it takes, which is a shame because this is amazing content, right? I mean, the boss fight versus Savathun is awesome, and the whole mission plays like a Nightfall in the sense that you got champions, you got these modifiers, you got different combat scenarios, and so it just seems like there's a shame. It's a shame that these missions aren't exactly replayable. Like, make the rewards better. If it's going to take you that long to do a mission, don't just give us a common drop rate at Ascendant Alloys. Give us a guaranteed drop rate where you spend that much time, you get an Ascendant Alloy. Maybe give us some Prisms. Maybe give us some Adept Throne World weapons or something. There just needs to be something more to them, I think, to make them replayable, especially if it's just like a weekly based mission. Right, but the same goes for a lot of the exotic missions, like we had for this past week. Avalon, which is one of my favorite exotic missions. I mean, it came out when I was kind of in the middle of my, peak game playing with Destiny 2. Avalon dropped the Vex Caliber exotic mission, or exotic glaive. And it was just such a great mission. It played like a dungeon. It had various encounters with rally flags. But unfortunately, like, you couldn't save checkpoints, you couldn't, and there was no like secret chests where there was guaranteed loot along the way. There was no loot in between encounters. And then basically all you went in there for was to get the exotic on your first run, and then to do it like 3 more times on the hard difficulty, and to get the catalyst fully fleshed out. And maybe you're ticking off some triumphs along the way if you're into that. But if you're not, it's a shooter looter. Where's all the loot? Like, and it kind of drives me nuts because Bungie has come out and said, like, they've wasted a lot of resources, time and money on very high quality missions, like these campaigns. Like, they can't do these campaigns anymore. Like, the Final Shape was just top tier quality, but they're not going to invest in doing that kind of stuff anymore because people aren't playing them, right? At least that's what I assume. I might have misunderstood that, but that seems to be the case. We have all these amazing high-end missions that are not replayable. There's nothing to go in. There's no purpose to go and replay it. But they've put so much passion and energy into these missions. So it seems like if they gave us a greater reason to go in there, then we would probably invest more time in the game, right? And money. Like, why are Grandmaster Nightfalls the only replayable missions? Like, we have a different rotating weapon every season for every mission, with different surges. And like, these are like, some of these are 10-year-old Nightfalls, from Destiny 1. But that's the thing. People just look forward to the GMs every week because there's something new to do there, and the rewards are very high. Whereas all of these other missions that have a lot more time investment into them by Bungie are just not getting any light of the day because they're just not replayable. So it's a shame, right? And Dual Destiny is going to suffer the same thing when everybody's got their 192 unique class items, or maybe they're not crazy like me and they don't want every single one. Maybe they just have their god rolls for each character, and then they're never going to touch Dual Destiny again, right? And Dual Destiny is like another one of the best exotic missions I've ever done. Right, so fortunately right now it is still very farmable and very replayable, right? If you're still chasing those exotics, which a lot of people have a problem with the drop rates on the exotics, but I'm happy that I have a reason to go and do this 3 times a week on each character for double drops. I think it's a really good way to balance replayability with loot. Another thing they could do too is like they can give us some reason to go and replay dungeons, because even though dungeons are much more replayable than exotic missions and campaign missions, even the dungeons, after a while, you just don't need to go back in, because you've got, you've pretty much got all that you need. You've got Artifice Armor, you've got all the weapons with the God rolls. So we have Warlord's Ruin, for example, which, a lot of people are probably still trying to get their God roll Indebted Kindness, but if you've already got it, then, and you've got all your ornaments and stuff, then you have no reason to redo it. Like, why don't we have Adept weapons on Master difficulty? And why can't we enhance the weapons that we get from the dungeons yet? Like, we can enhance world drop weapons like Crux Termination, but we can't enhance Cold Comfort from Ghosts of the Deep. So yeah, a few little issues like that. I wish Bungie would improve upon it, but I'm just one guy speaking my mind on that. So then we get into the seasonal activities and more. And I wanted to just briefly go over, I'm trying to keep this segment of the podcast around 15 minutes or so. So, I'm going to try to make this fast here. But the seasonal activities in the Helm, I started off post Final Shape just being really down on the season. Like, all we had at the beginning in the first act was Breach Executable with Enigma Protocol, and neither of those seemed very rewarding. They didn't seem like good activities. And aside from like the Stasis Grenade Launcher that does like the Stasis Wither Horde from the seasonal weapons, I didn't really find much enjoyment in doing doing these activities. Once I got that weapon, I was like, I don't want to redo this. I got Final Shape stuff I could be doing, farming the Pale Heart, or anything else really. But now that we're 3 acts into this season, like, the number of activities that we have, and I think I really started to fall in love with the season, with the episode, I should say, when Battlegrounds came out. And the 3 Battlegrounds that we got, I'm so happy that they're going to integrate these into Nightfalls, because, again, these are top tier. Like, whoever designed these at Bungie, bravo. It's like amazing missions. I can't wait till they're in the Nightfall rotation. So I've been having a lot of fun, at least doing like what I need to do every week on these to farm my engrams and my Cast No Shadows weapons. Right, so we got Encore Overture, we got 3 different Battlegrounds. Enigma Protocol actually can drop you double perk weapons, so you can have up to 4 perks on these weapons, at least like for 1 or 2 drops a week, which I didn't realize. And you can get Ascendant Alloys. So far I've gotten Ascendant Alloys from Breach Executable and Enigma Protocol. I thought originally it was just Enigma Protocol, but it's also Breach, so it's a low drop rate. It's not like doing the campaign missions in the Throne World or on Neomuna, but it's every now and then you will get an alloy, so that's quite good, right? So yeah, Battlegrounds, Enigma, Breach Executable, and the exotic mission. Like, if you do what you have to do on the weekly challenges for these activities, it's a rewarding variety of gameplay. So I thought Bungie actually did pretty good 3 acts into this episode, and I think it's a good call that they listened to the community and decided that they're going to give us they're not going to time gate in the next episode. So I don't know if we're going to get all 3 acts in one shot, but we're going to get everything that's I think we are. I can't remember, but they're going to give us more stuff all at once so that we can farm it on our own pace, right? Because the other downside is, like, now there's only like 5 weeks left in the season, and that means we've only got 5 weeks to really enjoy the the farm with Encore and some of these Battlegrounds missions. Whereas, like Breach Executable and Enigma, which are the lesser activities as far as quality, have been around for months. So I would prefer if we just were able to get access to everything that the episode offers all at once. Right, but that's just me. And then we also got like some pretty amazing weapons, didn't we? We got Red Death, which it's a pulse rifle, and it's not a huge damage dealer, but it is a survivable weapon. We got the Catalyst, gives you up to Restoration ×2, which can pair very nicely with solar builds with Ember of Empyrean to extend Restoration ×2. So that's pretty cool. We also got, obviously we got Choir of One, which is a special ammo auto rifle from the new exotic mission. which is just making waves right now. We also got Aberrant Action, which another rocket sidearm, but this is the solar flavor with heel clip and incandescent, so very good there. And like I said, the stasis grenade launcher, which I don't have equipped here, but you probably know which one I'm talking about. I can't remember the name of it. And the artifact mods in general for the season are also pretty good. I like that we progressively got more rows to deal with, and there was a lot of variety from the get-go. With the seasonal artifact, you can basically play into any kind of elements you want, and there's something in there for you, whether it's damage resist from arc, or spreading slow from stasis weapons, or doing more damage with void weapons, just being radiant all the time. And then we get solar fulmination for bigger ignitions. We get this sniper buff where you can just do massive sniper damage, and then the auto rifle buff, which we currently have with shock and awe for even more arc damage. And then of course we've got, like, enhancing your transcendence, like big time with transference and stuff like that. So yeah, the seasonal artifact was very good. I hope they do more of that, and not like the season 23 Season of the Wish, where we just had like 7 months of solar only. Like, that was the stalest artifact meta I'd ever seen in this game. But we're in a pretty good state right now, I would say. Other weapons, we also got the Cast No Shadows weapons, which are pretty good. So like, this is the big one here. I think this is the highlight for me of the season, aside from, out of the Cast No Shadows. This is the first time I really took interest in Saint 14's weapons, when Martyr's Retribution released with the exotic, this past week with the exotic mission. We got 2 new weapons from the Radiolera Transposer origin trait weapons, like the machine gun and the trace rifle, but we got this Cast No Shadows Waveframe Solar GL. It is basically solar forbearance with incandescent and heel clip, and it is absolutely amazing. And then so I got a little bit more into farming those weapons, and I landed a few perfect paradoxes, and I didn't really pay much attention to them before, but then I realized that, okay, wow, this thing is actually kind of meta as far as 1-2 punch melee build shotguns go, because the origin trait refills your magazine partially on melee hits, and then you can get like pugilist and trench barrel, or 1-2 punch, right? So I mean, pretty good there. And also I'm farming for this Line in the Sand, which I didn't realize can roll double damage perks, right? So I mean, it's a precision frame linear, which is not in a good state as far as the meta goes, but that could change easily. And it's got some very high damage perks like bait and switch on it. And you get it with like rapid hit and bait and switch for just kind of a traditional roll, but I'm going for deconstruct and bait and switch, which is pretty niche, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be looking for vehicle type enemies like Briggs or Shanks or Shriekers or whatever qualifies as a vehicle or construct, but deconstruct, as you know, does 40% more damage to those vehicles and constructs, right? And that can roll in the first column with bait and switch in the second, so you can get a 40% damage buff with a 35% or 30% damage buff. Multiplicatively, that's probably giving you like 60+% damage. But even if you're not shooting a construct, deconstruct reloads the mag as you do damage. So I mean, it is essentially a reload perk, right? Which would just make your magazine that much bigger. So I'm hoping to eventually get a deconstruct bait and switch, just to have that as a specialty type weapon, right? But now on to the good stuff. Endgame builds, right? So what is this build that I'm on? This is a Prismatic Titan build that I decided to bring into Heist Battlegrounds Europa on Grandmaster difficulty. And I did discuss this build briefly in the last episode. This is using Spirit of Assassin with Spirit of Scars, right? And with these Heist Battlegrounds GMs, the biggest issue is the boss arena. It's survivability in the boss arena, and it is the mechanic in the boss arena, because when you take the boss down to halfway, you then have to dunk 5 orbs in the middle of the map, in the middle of the arena, while somehow surviving, right? So I've always, like, the easiest thing to do is just play on Invis Hunter on with like Omnioculus or Gyrfalcons, and then you could just easily get it done without worrying at all, right? Now Titans have Spirit of the Assassin with the exotic class items, so this means that we can just on demand on any subclass, or sorry, on any prismatic build that involves Spirit Assassin, we can go invis on finishers or on melee kills, right? And so I primarily use this build to go prime enemies to get them finishable, especially to do that mechanic, so that I can time my invis so that I can pick up the orb and dunk it safely and make it back to cover in time. Right, so, and then Scars is giving me restoration on every single kill as long as I'm matching my weapons with my super, which I'm doing here with Blade Fury. So I'm using the Strand Super Blade Fury. Right, you can see that here if you're watching this on video. So as long as I use Strand weapons, then I can get restoration, right? So I'm using the Call and I'm using Pro Memoria, two top tier weapons of the season of the final shape, possibly the best two weapons from the final shape that are legendary. Easy way to get restoration on every kill, right? And then I'm supplementing that with Red Death because we have barrier champions, right? So we've got unstops and barriers. So the Call is taking care of unstops as an unstoppable sidearm, and then Red Death is taking care of barriers. But it's also kind of interesting too that Red Death, even though it's not matching our super and is not benefiting from precious from Spirit of Scars, it is still giving us restoration on kills. It's giving us cure on kills for us and our allies, and giving us restoration ×2 every now and then, right? So, and it can break barrier shields. So if I'm running low on special ammo or heavy ammo, then I can always just kind of play passively in the back with Red Death and still get that restoration. So no matter what weapons I'm using with this build, I'm always getting healing back. And if I need to clutch on invis, I can do that, right? So I'm using for abilities here, Thruster Dodge, just because it's my favorite for Prismatic and Arc Titan, and then triple Frenzy Blades for that knockout consecration, and a Shackle Grenade, right? So for this, it's situational as far as the grenade goes. I use this build, like I said, for Europa. And because we don't have overloads, I didn't really feel the need to use pulse grenades with dominance. Instead, I just went shackles. That helps with unstops. It helps just do a bit of crowd control. So, you know, on top of the survivability of Assassin and the and Scars for giving restoration and cure to myself and my allies, I can also help everybody out by suspending enemies, right? So that's just kind of nice there. And it saves me a fragment slot. It means I don't have to use Echo of Dominance. And so for fragments here, I'm using Protection, Courage, so I get increased Consecration damage, Facet of Balance, so that I can get more Consecration energy, more Frenzy Blades, more Shackle Grenades, as long as I'm doing damage with Light and Dark, and Facet of Solitude for Sever for an additional 40% damage resistance on those severed enemies, right? You just land precision hits. Very easy to do with Pro Memoria or Red Death. That's also going to, you know, apply some darkness damage when you make that severing burst, so that's kind of nice there. And then you can run this with Facet of Dawn, which is what I would recommend, especially if you have barriers, right? Because that's going to allow you to, like, you can go up to a barrier, you can consecrate it, and if it starts to put its shield up before it's dead, then no matter what weapon you have out, you can pretty much break their shield because you've got anti-barrier rounds due to Radiant, right? So applying, getting Radiant by applying your melee is quite useful, right? Especially in a season where we don't have things like Radiant orbs, or if, you know, or if you just don't have an orb nearby to get Radiant, right? So Facet of Dawn is pretty nice. You could also use Facet of Bravery because we're using Strand weapons, and because we've got an easy melee kill ability like Consecration, it's easy access to Unraveling rounds. So I actually did do this Grandmaster with Facet of Bravery instead of, I think instead of Balance, right? So I didn't have as many Consecrations, but when I did use that Consecration, not only would I get Radiant, but I'd get Unraveling rounds, so that I have like double the means of breaking barriers. So yeah, that's fun. So you can use Dawn or you can use Unravel. It's up to you. And then the other version of this build would be if you're up against overloads, right? So if you're doing Expert Encore, the exotic mission, or any GM where you got overloads, then I would recommend you just switch to Pulse Grenades instead of Shackle. And instead of Facet of Dawn, then you could just put on Dominance so that you can have that jolt on your Pulse Grenade. And then that's just an immediate stun, on an overload. It's pretty much the best ability to take care of overloads. So that's what I would recommend, and that's what I did when I carried this build over into Encore on expert difficulty. Yeah, and so speaking on the importance of dark and light damage here, I actually did a poll this past week asking you guys, what do you think the best way to build up Transcendence fast is? Is it to use, kinetic weapons with fragments like Facet of Grace for increased, you get a balanced amount of light and dark energy for your Transcendence meter with kinetic weapons, whether you're using this fragment or not, but this fragment just increases the speed at which you get Transcendence with kinetic weapons, so it's pretty good for that. But there's just an intrinsic way to get Transcendence with Prismatic, of course, as many of you know, I'm sure, and that's just to just do damage proportionally with light and dark abilities, and I think the whole sandbox of Prismatic is kind of tailored to that, right? So the best way to do that on Prismatic Titan is to use Consecration, because that is just hands down the best ability that Prismatic Titan has. Maybe one of the best abilities in the game, period, amongst all classes, all subclasses. And that, of course, is light damage, right? You're going to do a ton of ad clear, you're going to a ton of single target damage with light damage because of Consecration. So it means that pretty much anything else that you use on Prismatic Titan should be focused on dark, right? And so you could do that with your super, of course, but your super is not a reliable way to increase your dark energy, because you don't always have your super available, right? You're going to be using Consecration regularly, so I always tend to just use Strand weapons, right? Because the Call and Pro Memoria are getting 25% extra damage in every single Nightfall, every single week. It doesn't matter if they're not matching the weekly surge, because they're overcharged weapons, right? So if you look at the modifiers in the Nightfall, it says overcharged weapons are ones that include ones from the seasonal artifact. So Unstoppable Sidearm. So any sidearm is always going to have 25%, right? It doesn't matter if it's solar or arc or whatever the weekly surges are. It's a sidearm, it gets 25%. It's not stackable with the other surges anyways. Same goes for overcharged armory. So all of the Pale Heart weapons, always overcharged. Radial Arrow weapons, always overcharged. The raid weapons, always. And Warlord's Ruin weapons, they're always overcharged as long as you have overcharged armory. So it means that you can just use these all the time, and that's kind of what I've been doing, and I'm getting a little sick of it, I'll admit. But it is by far the fastest way to get Transcendence, in my experience, on Prismatic Titan without using fragments to supplement your building up Transcendence. It's just use Consecration for that light damage and use good Strand weapons for the dark damage, and then you're going to have Transcendence like all the time, right? And then, I mean, that is the strength of Prismatic Titan. So that's pretty much it for this assassin build here. What did I use for combat mods, just so you can see real quick? Solar Loader, Strand Loader, just to make those weapons feel better. Harmonic Siphon and Targeting, and then resists don't really matter that much. Just use whatever makes sense for the activity. And then I use Strand Holster and Strand Scavenger with Special Finisher. So this season I've pretty much just been running Special Finisher as a function for my armor charge, instead of using like surges for my legs, for that weapon boost. I don't do that anymore this season. Occasionally I'll run kickstarts for like grenades and melee abilities, so you can get some energy back from your armor charge on your, when you throw your grenade. But having Special Finisher is so good in a meta where rocket sidearms are the thing, right? And now we have Choir of One as well, which is a special weapon. So yeah, like why worry about having ammo when you could just finish an enemy and then just get your ammo, right? So it basically, having special finisher basically just turns all builds into having infinite special ammo, and that is the power of your, that's the power of your build right there, is relying on those special ammo weapons, right? You don't need to supplement your abilities that much, especially when like the abilities are already strong enough, and they're very spammable, especially with Transcendence. Your like ability spam is no issue, right? You don't need kickstarts, you don't need, and you don't even need extra weapon damage aside from just matching the weekly surges and or overcharged weapons modifiers, because you're getting 25% there, and you're using special weapons, right? You're not using dinky primaries like legendary primaries. In that case, yeah, maybe you want some surges for a really bad weapon, right? But we have really good weapons. So yeah. And then the other build that I used on Titan this week was, I wanted to revisit Berserker, right? Strand Titan. Because I went in to do the Whisper mission, as I touched on earlier, and I just kind of wanted to go in there with just a standard meta build. I wasn't sure on the survivability, right? There's the one thing with Prismatic Titan is it's not necessarily the most survivable unless you're using like the Assassin Scars build that I was using there, but I don't like to use the same build for every damn thing in the game. I like to switch it up. And Strand Titan is still definitely one of my favorites, if not my favorite core subclass build, right? And I mean, this just looks freaking cool. If you can see this on video, some of my favorite fashion for Strand Titan. But yeah, so I'm on Strand, and I'm using Banner of War and Into the Fray with Syntheseps, right? You can use Worm Gods too if that's your style, but I'm just more of a having that automatic biotic enhancements is easier for me. Thread of Fury for increased melee energy. On top of that, Into the Fray, right? So Into the Fray gives you a ton of melee energy when you have your Woven Mail, and then your damaging enemies with Tangles is going to give you melee energy and Woven Mail, right? So they feed back into each other, Into the Fray and Thread of Fury. Thread of Warding for additional Woven Mail, because that's going to feed into giving us more Tangles, right, from Transmutation. Kill any enemies with any types of weapons, whether they're Strand or not, or debuffed or not. As long as you have Woven Mail, weapon kills are going to give you Tangles, which is not really an issue on Strand Titan anyways, but it's just kind of a more automatic way to get Tangles, right? Because I wasn't purely using Strand weapons or doing Strand debuffs all the time, but I pretty much had Woven Mail all the time. And then you could pair that with like Thread of Propagation, so you get Unraveling Rounds. This is kind of just a flex slot fragment. I was using Imminence, the Strand SMG from Salvation's Edge, as my kind of add clear SMG in between encounters, right? And then for boss damage, I would switch over to something else. But for this weapon loadout specifically, this is my traversal loadout for the Whisper mission. I just used Imminence. I can get Unraveling Rounds on it just from using my Frenzy Blade. Buried Bloodline just for survivability, and I wanted a special ammo weapon in that slot to switch over to in case I need to use my 1-2 punch shotgun. And then an Eager Edge, the other half here, with Whirlwind Blade just to move around fast. But then when we get to damage, so for the bosses, I would switch over to Basso, and I would keep on Imminence, right? And then I'd use Tractor, right? This is just kind of the standard grapple melee 1-2 punch Frenzy Blade. Use your super, just destroy everything. And aside from Consecration Titan with Knockout and Synthos, this is still like the best, one of the best options for melee boss damage in the game, and it's still amazing. It's definitely extremely survivable. Like, I forgot how survivable Banner of War and Woven Mail is on core Strand Titan. Yeah, definitely still kills it. All right, and I almost forgot, I wanted to go over the seasonal artifact for the core builds, right? Because we're not on Prismatic, it means that we're going to pick our seasonal artifact mods a little bit differently, right? And there's still lots to benefit from, which is, probably something that a lot of people have just overlooked from this season, is there's a lot of things that that the seasonal artifact has to offer core builds, right? So going through it with a full reset here, this is what I'm selecting for the Strand Titan build, right? So obviously I got to pick 3 anti-champion mods because we have no choice. So let's pick Unstoppable Sidearm. Maybe the overcharged weapons modifiers active in an activity that we decide to bring this into, right? So because I was using Buried Bloodline occasionally, I'll put on Unstoppable Sidearm. Because we're using Imminence as an SMG, we'll use Anti-Barrier SMG, and then let's just pick whatever else. Void Special Weapon, maybe you want to take Inquire of 1, so let's pick Overload Auto Rifle. Then dealer's choice weapons, we've got to pick at least 2 of these column perks, and these are all basically revolving around origin traits and elemental charge, scavenger, charge it up, kind of just silly artifact mods that we're not really going to use. They're not going to make or break a build in any way. But let's pick Overcharged Armory and Winning Hand, just because we are typically using a lot of Pale Heart weapons. If you're using Radiolaria weapons, pick Logic Reductor instead of Winning Hand, or instead of Overcharged Armory, right? But those 3 perks from that column, right, the ones that are going to overcharge several origin traits, you want to pick those. Or enhance those origin traits like Winning Hand, right? You get those solar explosions from Pale Heart weapons, so that's pretty good. Now we have access to the 3rd column row of perks, right? So we can pick Threaded Blast, because obviously we're producing tangles left and right, so let's make them do more damage, right? Basically like an ignition size damage on those tangle detonations, so that's pretty good. We've got to pick something else here. Well, we can pick Elemental Siphon, right? So if we do damage with Strand weapons or kinetic weapons, because we're on the Strand subclass, we can produce more tangles, right? It's going to create an elemental pickup. So that's just kind of a neutral perk that we can use there. If you really were using your auto rifle like Choir of One, then obviously go with Sustained Fire instead. Or additionally. Now what else? We have access to the 4th column now. So if you're dealing with champions, obviously use Counter Energy for more ability spam, right? You stun champions, you get ability energy. But let's pick Radiant Orbs, because why not? How else are we going to get Radiant on Strand Titan? Let's just pick up some orbs and get Radiant and do even more weapon damage. Why not? Then what else? We still got to pick at least 1 or 2 more things before we can get into the next column here. We were doing a lot of we're doing a lot of void damage, right? So let's use Void Hegemony. While we have Void or Prismatic subclass. Okay, so we don't have a Void or Prismatic subclass, so that's not going to do anything. But we could use like Blade Stamina or Overload Sword. We were using a sword for traversal, so we can use one of those. We can overcharge our sword, give it 25% more damage, and give us damage resistance when we disrupt enemies. Or we can use Blade Stamina, right? Keep in mind, maybe we're playing with teammates here, and we can get access to like Amplified, right? We would have to have an Arc or Prismatic subclass, so never mind. Galvanic Armor is not going to do anything. So let's just pick Counter Energy in case there's ever champions. Now we can pick 2 more. We now have access to the 5th column, right? So we can pick, we're not using Sniper Rifles, so that doesn't really matter. Shield Crush. While you have Woven Mail, your melee recharges faster and deals increased damage. So this is going to stack with Thread of Fury, with Into the Fray, with our strength stat. So that's really good. So Shield Crush is awesome for core subclasses still, right? Especially on a class where we're always going to have Woven Mail. And then we could pick Expanding Abyss. So Void Sources deal increased damage to weakened targets, right? We were using Buried Bloodline, which automatically weakens enemies, so it's going to do more damage. And then for boss damage, we're using Tractor Cannon for weaken, and Basso Ostinato for 1-2 punch shotgun, right? So why not? Even though melee is doing most of our damage, we can still use Expanding Abyss. Okay, so then on to my Hunter build that I used this week, and actually didn't spend a lot of time on this, but I thought it was good enough to include with this episode because it involves It involves some void weapons, and as you know, we got Choir of One, which is an amazing special ammo auto rifle that has 2 different fire modes, and apparently is doing like an insane amount of damage versus bosses, especially on a divinity bubble. It's going to be patched according to Bungie, but yeah, it is definitely the hype right now. So I figured I'd include this build because I didn't originally make this build specifically for Choir of One. It was just kind of a thought I had about combining, as I was mentioning with Prismatic Titan and Transcendence in general, is, like the concept behind Prismatic in general is do light damage, do dark damage. If you do it proportionally, you're going to have Transcendence very often, right? So that's how you get it. So with all my builds, I'm always thinking of ways to combine light and dark damage, right? Unless it's specifically like a kinetic based build where, maybe I'm relying on like Microcosm or a kinetic primary exotic weapon, like especially a Weapon of Sorrow for Warlock, right? Those are special cases as far as building Transcendence on Prismatic. But yeah, so for this Hunter build, I was thinking I originally had this Gyrfalcons and Foetracer, right? So I'm using the Relativism cloak here with Spirit of the Foetracer and Spirit of the Gyrfalcon. And so Foetracer gives you a weapon. It gives you a ×4 weapon surge boost on ability application, right? So if you apply, say, a void, if you hit an enemy with a void grenade, you're going to get 25% extra void weapon damage for 10 seconds, right? I believe it's 10 seconds. The enemy has to be like an elite or a major or a champion or a boss for it to work, but that's fine. You don't need it. You don't need a ×4 boost for red bars anyways, right? So whether that's your melee or your grenade or your super, it's going to proc Foetracer. Which is very interesting because it's kind of like Eternal Warrior on or Doomfang pauldrons. All right, there's a few exotics that we have now that give you this intrinsic ×4 surge, right? And you can't get access to that ×4 elsewhere in the game without using an exotic. Like you can use 3 copies of surge mods on your legs, right? I mean, so I can use Solar Weapon Surge ×3 or Void Weapon Surge ×3, right? And that's going to give you up to 22% damage, right? Because there's diminishing returns. The first copy of the surge mod is going to give you 10%, the second is going to take you up to 17% or 18, and then the third is going to take you only up to 22, right? And that's an investment of 9 energy on your legs, which means that you're also sacrificing very good combat mods like recuperations for survivability and scavenger mods for more special and heavy ammo, right? So the very key, very competitive slot on the legs here. So unless you're like swapping loadouts mid damage phase to switch to surges, right? And it seems like Bungie might not want us to be switching loadouts so much, hence the reserve nerf, because people used to rally with triple reserves and then switch that off after they rally. So, this might not be in the game for long where we're able to, maintain armor charge and switch to surges. So some of these exotics are going to be even more important, right? So yeah, Foetracer gives you that ×4, so that's 25% extra damage, and it's only 3% more. But there's no energy investment cost for your combat mods. It's just intrinsic to the exotic, to the spirit of Foetracer, right? Whether you're using the actual Foetracer exotic or you're using the spirit version on the cloak, which I would definitely do, because then you can use other spirits to combine with it. So I just happen to have Gyrfalcons on this one, so I'm thinking, well, it's got to be a void build, because then I can have volatile rounds all the time, and get 25% extra damage, right? So I was thinking that I could do this on Prismatic Hunter with Deadfall as my super, right? Not because I absolutely... So keep in mind, like, Foetracer works with whatever ability you apply with, right? So you can see here, look, I'm using Deadfall, and then I'm using Snare Bomb, and then I'm using Duskfield Grenade. So this means that if I hit an enemy with my Snare Bomb or my Tether, I get a ×4 void weapon boost. If I hit an enemy with my dusk field, I also get a ×4 stasis weapon boost, right? So it means I can use a void weapon and a stasis weapon and get ×4 for both of them at the same time. And then I'm combining that with Stylish Executioner and Winter Shroud. But the main thing here is Gyrfalcon is a trick. The Spirit of Gyrfalcon is a tricky one on Prismatic Hunter, because the Gyrfalcon's Hauberk build is just more instantaneous on Night Stalker, on the core void subclass, because you have Vanishing Step, right? Or Trapper's Ambush, right? You can just go invisible on command or with the finisher, right? Like, there's 3 different ways that you can go invis on command on Night Stalker to immediately proc Vault rounds from Gyrfalcons, right? Because as you emerge from invisibility, you get those Vault rounds. That's how it works. And the Stylish Executioner just lets you maintain that gameplay loop, right? As you get kills with volatile rounds, you're applying that debuff, you go invisible, and then you just keep the loop going, right? So Night Stalker has the quickest way to get access to volatile rounds, because you can just immediately go invisible. Spirit of Gyrfalcons, because you don't have any of those, you don't have Vanishing Step, you don't have Trapper's Ambush, you don't have Echo of Exchange or whatever it is where you go invis on finishers. You don't have any of that, so you need to apply debuffs, right? And you can do that very easily with Winter Shroud, right? And Duskfield for that matter, but Winter Shroud is just a very fast, easy way to do it. I mean, second to Night Stalker, that is, right? You dodge near an enemy, you apply slow in a wide radius, any of those enemies that you kill is going to make you invisible, and then you just have to use your void weapons from there, and Stylish Executioner is going to keep that gameplay loop going. It's much better than trying to do a void and strand type of build, which you might be thinking is how you would build into Gyrfalcons, is like, because you can combine it with Facet of Bravery, for example, right? So Facet of Bravery would allow you to double dip into Unraveling rounds and Volatile rounds and apply dark and light damage equally, right? But you'd have to get melee kills, and you'd have to be mindful of what weapons you're using when, and so Facet of Bravery would be good, but I think the real answer is you need to be able to get Gyrfalcons procced fast, and the best way to do that is to just use the most accessible debuff, which is slow, right? Threaded Spectre is not going to get you, it's not going to get you easily, it's not going to debuff enemies, it's just going to put a decoy there, right? That's it. Sever, right? You can apply Sever from Facet of Solitude, but that needs a tanky target that is actually big enough to tanky enough to sustain the damage to be severed, right? So it's not going to help you when you're trying to do ad clear, which is what Volatile rounds is basically best for. And then so I mean, slow is just by far the easiest way. And then you could also use like a chill clip weapon, right? So another build that you can use, it's a different weapons setup here. Instead of using Choir of One, you can use like just Ros Arago, any repulsor brace weapon, with a chill clip weapon, or something that applies a stasis debuff. So conditional finality, deliverance, or if you have Riptide, right? So like one kill with deliverance, because the top part of the mag applies slow, that's going to make you invisible right away, right? So use chill clip to go invis, and then use your void weapons, right? You've applied darkness, you've done dark damage, now you can go to town on light damage. And then as you're doing all that light damage with volatile rounds, you can throw your dusk fields out, you can use your Winter Shrouds, you're applying slow, you're applying freeze, you're shattering enemies, you're also severing enemies with Facet of Solitude, right? So I didn't name the fragments here, but Protection, Dawn, with Facet of Hope, Facet of Purpose, and Solitude. So Facet of Hope and Solitude are going to work hand in hand as you have which includes invisibility, by the way. So when you have an elemental buff, you will get your class ability back very fast, right? This is kind of like the Ember of Singeing from Solar. You just get more class ability energy. Very good when you need to apply Winter Shroud to get access to your volatile rounds. Facet of Solitude of purpose, right? That's going to give us a Void Overshield on Orb pickup, right? Repulsor Brace on our weapon is also going to give us access to Void Overshields to proc Facet of Hope, but if you're using Choir of One, that might not be the case. But either way, so Hope and Purpose work hand in hand. Facet of Solitude is going to, occasionally help us get invisible from debuffing enemies. It's also going to give us damage resistance, so that's why I just like to use Facet of Solitude on a lot of builds. But the important thing here is Dawn with Snare Bomb. So now, off the topic of Gyrfalcons, right, we've also got Foetracer. So this build is extremely versatile as far as ad clear and boss damage goes. Because we're using Dawn and Snare Bomb, we can apply Weaken and Radiant and proc Foetracer all in one action, right? You throw that Snare Bomb, you've applied 15% Weaken, right? Or you use your Tether, right, for 30% Weaken. Then add 25% weapon damage for Radiant, while also having 25% weapon boost on your weapon. So you're stacking 15% at the very minimum with one Snare Bomb throw. You're applying a 15% damage buff plus a 25% damage buff plus another 25% damage buff. So multiplicatively, that is the most amount of damage that you can get with one single action on any subclass or setup, basically. To make Choir of One better than it can be with any other build, right? So that's the takeaway here, is even though I wasn't necessarily using this for Choir of One, you can make Choir of One do the most amount of damage possible in the game, right? Especially with Tether. So Tether, Radiant, and Foetracer for that 25%, nothing does more damage. Like, that is, you want to maximize Choir of One, that's how you do it. I suppose you could do it on Eternal Warrior with Titan, but you would get it for 30 seconds after super use, right? With Hunter, you can have it on every Snare Bomb throw, which includes while you're Transcendent. If you pop Transcendence, you can throw back-to-back Snare Bombs and just have 10 seconds after 10 seconds of Radiant and Weaken, right? So very good. And I basically just tested this out in Terminal Overload, so at some point I'm sure I will do a dedicated build video for this setup here. But yeah, that's basically it. All right, so as I said, I want to try and keep these under an hour. So to close up here for a few minutes, I'm going to talk about the weapons I decided to invest my resources into this week with all the new weapons and a lot of old weapons that I've had sitting around just waiting to be upgraded. The last few videos and content that I did was talking about farming alloys and farming resources so that you can enhance your weapons and put enhanced perks, put some community polls out on these topics as well. So here's what I decided to do. I farmed up enough Ascendant alloys last week in the Last Chance and the week before that in the Cunning that I had basically 20 alloys. I had almost max prisms, right? So I had like 90 plus prisms and I had 1,000 enhancement cores. So I decided that I had basically enough to do, fully level up and enhance 9 weapons, and I've got way more than that I could enhance. So I went through and picked out the weapons that I really wanted to prioritize, and so I fully enhanced 9 weapons, both adept raid weapons, world drop weapons, and craftable weapons, and then I worked on towards a couple others that I didn't fully finish, right? So I ended up spending 800,000 glimmer, 18 ascendant alloys, about 50 enhancement prisms, and about 500 enhancement cores to do this. I just did this yesterday, right, like the day before reset, just to spend some time. So here's what I did. All right, so Perfect Paradox. This is a double perk roll that I got from Enigma Protocol, and it rolled with Slide Shot, Pugilist, in the first column, Trench Barrel, and Vorpal. So, I mean, Trench Barrel being the big one there with Slide Shot and or Pugilist, that's a pretty darn good roll, so I decided to invest in it. Whenever you have double perks from like raid weapons or whatever, brave weapons, it doesn't matter, like you're getting so much more value for your resources because you're just enhancing all those perks. You know, you get 4 enhanced perks for the cost of 2 alloys. So that's a pretty good deal if you ask me. And the barrels and stuff are pretty good. You can't change these. I mean, you just get what you get. I have corkscrew and tactical mag. So this is going to be an excellent shotgun to use, especially like with consecration. If I can proc radiant with consecration on a barrier, then trench barrel is just going to absolutely totally finish off the barrier because I'm going to be radiant. It doesn't matter if they have their shield up. This is a rapid fire. It sounds cool. It looks cool, and I can get some more consecration energy from Pugilist, so that's pretty cool. Or I can just use Slide Shot, right? So yeah, very good weapon. Decided to go ahead and do that. Then on to the energy slot, Martyr's Retribution, right? So I spent 60 what are they called? The Echo Zengrams, right? I had like 70 of them sitting around at failsafe, right? And so on the first day of the act, when we got the Martyr's Retribution, I just decided to go and spend it on Cast No Shadows weapons, and I ended up rolling 13 different Martyr's Retributions, and this is the only one that I got with Heal Clip and Incandescent, with hard launch and high velocity rounds, and I think it rolled with a Masterwork of Velocity. So yeah, pretty much a god roll, pretty much a 5 out of 5. I couldn't ask for any better. Maybe quick launch instead of hard launch, but I mean, that's like negligible, right? So I went ahead and fully enhanced that. Then I've had this Oversoul Edict from Crota Zen with 6 perks, 6 adept perks, well, adept weapon with 6 perks. So for the cost of 2 alloys, I've got 6 enhanced perks on here, including Demolitionist and Volt Shot. So very good, aggressive style of gameplay. Pulse Rifle being a rapid fire, Demo and Volt Shot is probably going to be my main use, with Enlightened Action as an option to pair with Volt Shot. And then Arrowhead Break, and well, you know, the barrels on raid weapons, because these are craftable, you can take adept weapons to the Enclave and you can totally switch out the barrels and mags, right? You can do whatever you want here, right? All that matters is the perks on any adept craftable weapons. Then I went ahead and I enhanced Ros Arago IV. Finally, I haven't even used this, but I had the roll that I was waiting for my Hunter with Repulsor Brace and Onslaught, and I tested this out today, and it is absolutely amazing with that build out discussed with Gyrfalcons and Foetracer. For constant overshields and Onslaught is just crazy on this thing. So there we go, that's Masterwork now. And then on to the heavy slot. I did a lot here because these are some pretty good weapons. Scintillation, right? I have 7 of these with Rewind and Bait and Switch of Surrounded. I ended up enhancing the one with... I tested these in the Enclave to see what I thought felt the best. I've got... I don't even remember what the Masterwork is. I think it's a Charge Time Masterwork. So I've got Liquid Coils, which is increased impact damage but slower charge time, but that doesn't matter because I still have max charge time because of the Masterwork. Chambered Compensator and Adept Stability as the weapon mod, and then enhanced rewind rounds and Bait and Switch with rapid hit as an option. And then obviously I would pick Vice Stinger so I never run out of ammo. Then I've got my second slammer that in case I need to use it in a damage phase, I've got Relentless Strikes and Bait and Switch with the option for Eager Edge with Swordmaster's Guard and Jagged and Adept Impact. So this could be very good with Wolfpack rounds. Summum Bonum, Relentless Strikes, and Whirlwind Blade, just because I heard that's kind of the go-to and it is a very good sword for damage. Then I've got Qullim's Terminus, the Harrowed version from King's Fall that have been sitting around with the exact same perks on my crafted weapon. So this is just replacing my crafted version. Now I have adept mods on here with Unrelenting and Headstone, and you can put whatever barrel and mag you want on there. So that's very good for survivability and stasis synergy, and it just looks better being a black weapon instead of that kind of off-white beige color. Then Doomed Petitioner with Reconstruction and High Ground, thinking of the Witness. You always have High Ground procced against the Witness, so this could be very good when Void is surging or if Linears ever get a buff. So I went ahead and made that. And then I also crafted a Pro Memoria and Ill Omen, but I have yet to fully deck them out with enhanced perks. So that was my resources spent this week. I hope you enjoyed this video and or podcast. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.